Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor to be part of this virtual stage today. My name is Pablo Naranjo. I'm a chef from Colombia. And probably you might be asking, why is there a chef here like trying to talk about boundaries and stuff? I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But let's first of all start thinking. I would like everyone here to just think for a second, what does it really mean to go beyond boundaries? Like, what does it mean for you as a human being? And what does it mean for us all together as a community to go beyond our own boundaries? Because, of course, there's different aspects and different manners to tackle this situation, right? There's the very literal way. You can be really, really literal. Like, for example, take NASA, for instance, that they're literally every day trying to go a little bit farther, a little bit more away from what is our comfort zone, from what we know from Earth, right? I'm just waiting for one of these days just to wake up and say like, hey, humans just landed on Mars. That's one way of seeing that we are actually constantly going beyond boundaries. And if you really give it a thought, that is something that I believe that makes us human and makes us evolve and grows as a society as what we are. Because if we stayed back in the day when in the beginning of civilization, if we just stayed happy with what we had, probably we would have never discovered the wheel, or I don't know, made so many improvements in the way that we live. And we wouldn't be here talking to each other or listening to me talk about how to go beyond your own boundaries. And I think that in a certain way, boundaries are set, of course, to put a limit to what is right and wrong. So for today, let's just be positive human beings and think about the beautiful things in life. Let's say that every boundary that we're gonna try to break or put ourselves in the situation for is just to create some good and not some bad. I think that's a good start, at least for me, and that's how I operate. Because a lot of those boundaries are actually created by the society that we live in. I've lived in multiple continents and I've traveled quite a bit during my last 15 years of life. And one thing that I've understood is that a lot of the boundaries that we consider to be ours are kind of imposed by the way that people see things. So we all kind of have to behave in between certain lines and limits, but we're also told that every single human being is unique, right? So why are we all behaving the same exact way if we are all unique and we are all different? So those are the boundaries that probably society puts on us. And then there's the other boundaries that we actually decide that are going to be part of our lives. So that's basically just centered on our previous experiences, on our fears, on the mistakes that we've made. And in a lot of situations, we just want to be in a situation where we don't want to be as familiar, right? Like that's how I feel that we stand out as human beings. When you actually take all of those boundaries, all of those preset conceived notions about life and what we're supposed to do, and you put yourself in a situation where you start thinking, okay, who am I? What is my opinion on this? How do I feel about doing this way? And how can I actually do it in a different way? I think that that happens a lot of times when people ask you, okay, let's think out of the box. Let's just go to a place where we're thinking out of the box, or let's have some out of the box ideas. And what they're asking you is exactly that. Just break those internal boundaries and just stop doing the repetitive thing and do the same thing that comes naturally to you. Because we've lived very unique lives, all of us. We all have a reality that it's true to ourselves. And when you step out of your comfort zone, you are allowing yourself to be in a place where something can trigger you and only you. I'll develop a little bit more on this because I think that's quite interesting, and I want to talk a little bit more about that, but a little bit later. So let's start from the beginning. Why do I speak so confidently about going beyond boundaries? A lot of people said to me multiple times that I was so brave because I decided at 18 years old of age to just leave my country, go to a country where I didn't speak the language. And I had this dream of becoming a chef, and I decided to go to France. the place that is known for the perfection and the elegance and the mastery of the technique in cooking. And it sounds very romantic and very beautiful, but the truth is that I had no idea what I was doing. I was just following an idea, following a dream, following an image that I had in my head, right? And 18 years old, grabbed a backpack, landed in France, ended up working with really incredible chefs that taught me, like you have to repeat this same thing over and over again. It's 70 grams of flour for your bechamel. It cannot be 75 because that's how I like it. And then you start working on techniques and try to master every single technique for months and months. And after a while, you know how to do it. You can be better, of course, but you know how to do it. And in a certain way, it was really hard for me to kind of accept that I don't want to be perfect in every single technique in cooking. I want to learn. I want to be in a position where I want to just be like a kid. We have an incredible brain that it's built to adapt, to learn, to unlearn as well, right? When you are in a situation where you're constantly tasting, for example, for me as a chef, tasting new things or learning new techniques, you just forget about all that ego that we used to build as human beings, which is a very natural thing nowadays. And you just go back down to say, listen, I have no idea how this is done. Please teach me. And you're in a place where there's so much to build up from there. If you keep saying that you know this and I know this and I've studied and I've worked here and I've worked there and I have this much experience, the only thing that you're doing is closing the door for yourself to grow more as a human being, to explore different things, right? So because I decided that at a very young age, while working with these French chefs, I decided to go and work with a chef who was mixing a bunch of different ingredients. And I was telling you earlier that we all live a reality that it's only true to ourselves. We've only been in our experiences, and everything that we remember that has marked our life, it makes a difference. And when you step out of your comfort zone, you're risking your life now. You're risking being in a situation where something might trigger you and just you. The perfect example for this is pretty simple. My Colombian grandmother was an amazing cook. She used to cook wonderful food, and my whole childhood it was filled with yummy food. And I'm pretty sure that everyone can relate with something like that. Now, how many of you know your grandmother's recipes? How many of you are carrying that knowledge with you? Because it's staying there, and if she's not longer alive like mine, then that knowledge is just gone forever. So when I became a chef, I was probably after 3 years of living in France. I went back to Colombia and said to my grandmother, listen, I want you to teach me this specific recipe, the beef that you made with this sauce. Like, I just want to learn it. And she just laughed. She was already a little bit old in age, and she told me, I'm so sorry. I don't remember anymore how to make it. And that was like a bullet through my heart instantly, because I said, like, I never asked this before, and now what I'm gonna do. Now, cut to 3, 4 years later, I'm in this kitchen in France working for this chef who mixes a lot of different flavors, and he mixes a little bit of French techniques with Asian cuisine. So I'm making a beef broth, and he asked me to put some palm sugar in it. Palm sugar is a little bit like jaggery or panela here in Colombia. It's basically some caramelized sugarcane juice. So we put that into the broth. It's not very traditional, it's not very common to put something sweet into a savory broth, but I do it. I'm very good at following instructions. Then I'm right at that moment, I'm just cleaning some coriander, and coriander is an herb that it's not very common in French cuisine because it has a very strong, potent flavor. And I just feel like I have a bunch of roots and stems of coriander, and I asked my chef, like, can I put this in the broth as well? And he said, yeah, of course, that will build up some flavor. When the broth starts boiling and the smell comes out of it, I just start crying because it reminds me of the smell of my grandmother's house. Completely disconnected situations. But in that moment, at that day, I decided that no matter what it takes, I'm going to put myself through the most uncomfortable situations until I find the flavors and the smells and the memories from my childhood to kind of rebuild that recipe up. It kind of took me around 10 years, but I've made a recipe that I'm happy with. And most of those memories were out of smells when I walked into my grandmother's house as a kid, or looking at her tasting a broth with coriander, or multiple things. And I built it up in a certain way. So I truly believe that if I stayed back in Colombia, if I studied cuisine, if I became a chef in Colombia, probably I would have never been exposed to that kind of mix of flavors. And even though it was not my decision, that reality of my life, there was a kitchen full of like 25 people. It only triggered me. It only changed me. It only made me grow, because my reality of what I've lived in that out of the boundaries context that I was living, it just triggered me. It just made me cry. It didn't make cry anyone else. No one else knew what the hell was going on with this Colombian chef in the kitchen, where everyone is so concentrated about, we have to cook, we have to do this, and I was just crying. So that showed me that in a certain way, discomfort allows you to think in a freely manner. If you don't have any preset boundaries about something when you walk into a new situation, and you feel slightly uncomfortable, maybe at that point your brain is only going to be able to analyze the situation as a blank piece of paper, and then every single possibility is there. Like, you can just create anything out of that. That's the point where I understood in my life that creating food combinations would be something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. That, okay, learning techniques and all of that is really important to build a strong structure to grow up from, but suddenly just create a new dish with flavors that are not probably common to you, or that are not um, seen in a well manner in your culture. It's probably something that I want to be in. It's a situation I want to be in. It's a situation that I want to constantly be asking myself, what can I do differently? What can I do to stand out? What can I do to not do everything exactly the same way that everyone is doing? Because at the end of the day, please don't forget that we're unique human beings. We don't need to act exactly like everyone else, and that's fine. We respect the rules of society and we respect other human beings, but we are not set to be all equal. And that's completely fine. Sometimes we feel really horrible because we feel things differently, because we analyze things differently, but that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of life. Discomfort allows us to think freely and act freely and stand out from a crowd. Um, while I'm saying this, it's also important to say that it's not always very easy. Sometimes you have to break some old habits and you have to go against what it's your core being. And of course, I'm talking from the perspective of a chef. I'm not talking from the perspective of a random human being. So everything is related to food in my life, right? And when I say that I had to break some boundaries, is that probably a lot of people have tasted something as kids and they've hated it, and they're going to hate it their whole life, right? I grew up in a context where in my family, we were not eating a lot of different proteins, and the food was kind of traditional, and my parents like things in a certain way. So when I go to France and I'm working for this really good chef that I admire, and he tells me, hey, here, can you please open this oyster? And I was like, what's an oyster? And an oyster, if you've never had one before, if you've never seen one, if you've never heard of it before, like myself in that situation, well, it's a little bit intimidating. It's a rock-looking shaped thing that you open, and it's very soft on the inside, right? And that's not the first thing that you or that I used to think that was related to yumminess, to something good, to something tasty. But if I have this chef that I admire who really enjoys them, and he really likes it, and he wants me to eat one in front of him, maybe if I can put myself in his situation, maybe I can understand what I'm just about to taste without knowing what it is. And to go a little bit farther on that topic, it happened to me when I was living in India, and I was in the Northeast with an indigenous tribe, and the king welcomes me to the tribe, and he's like, hey, welcome. Today for you, we've prepared this recipe, and we're going to teach you how to make my favorite recipe. We only make it once a year. We make it on my birthday, but this year we're going to make it 2 times because you're here. We're going to give it to you. We're going to teach you how to make my favorite dish. So of course, number one, you're super humbled. You're in a tribe. They're opening the doors of their culture for you. And number two, they're cooking the meal that they cook only once, and they're going to make it twice this year because you're there. So you're like, I didn't even know how to thank them for giving me that opportunity, right? Then we walk into the kitchen, and this yummy dish that the king loves is water cockroaches and larvae. Okay, larvae were probably a little bit thicker than my thumb, really, really big. They were all alive. And for some reason, I think that we humans can relate very easily to the crunchiness of something being something positive. Uh, on the opposite side, we have the feeling that it's not something that we relate to something yummy. And that's the first thing that you're going to think when you have a larva with the thickness of my thumb, that it's moving, and you have huge cockroach. And of course, reflex of the chef, cockroaches, worms, that's not clean. That's a synonym of filthiness. But yet you're in a tribe, hundreds of kilometers away from civilization, and they're making this specially for you. So while they were cooking this delightful dish, they tell me that they're going to just boil for a couple of seconds these insects in a broth made with chili and ginger and everything that smelled really beautiful. But while they're preparing everything, I'm just telling myself, how do I remove this preset boundary that a cockroach is not clean? They collected it from the forest. It's probably super clean. How do I put in my head that this larva is not something disgusting, that it's something that they're honoring me with it? It's probably the best they have. It's like the synonym of giving caviar to someone in Russia. I don't know. It's an honor. It's a trophy. It's something. It's luxury, and I'm there trying to convince myself that it is actually luxury, that it is something that means everything to them. And of course, I could have just walked out, but I didn't. I stayed there, and I truly tried the dish. I closed my eyes and I said, it's food, and it's an honor that they're giving you. I'm so happy that I did it. Actually, it was very tasteful, and I think that if I didn't manage to make that difference and that gap in between what I was thinking and what it was in reality, I would have never been able to acknowledge that flavor, right? It had some flavor, like imagine some roasted peanuts with prawns. That was the flavor. It was really, really genuinely good. Now, the thing about going beyond boundaries is not, yeah, I tried it. No. It's about how to understand yourself, how to define what is actually important and what it's not. How many fears we're carrying from our childhood, from previous experiences, and we're going to judge everything according to that. And I don't think that's fair to everyone. And if we want to grow as a human being, we have to break those boundaries. We have to break those fears and put ourselves in situations that are going to be highly uncomfortable, but that are going to make us grow. That's why I use a synonym in my life. And I tell this to everyone that I meet, that I don't live my life, I taste my life. Because I think that when you taste something, you have a bunch of opportunities, right? You can say, I love it. You can say, I hate it. You can say, I want to taste it. I don't want to taste it. But there's also a big gray area for acquired taste. We all have developed acquired taste as human beings. If you give black coffee without sugar to a baby, they're probably not going to enjoy it. But look at me, I cannot live without coffee. The same thing happens with some people with chocolate, with maybe some whiskey or strong alcohol, right? Even with people who smoke, right? Or consume tobacco, like that's not something that comes naturally to us. Maybe everyone can remember the first time that they had coffee or tea or strong tea, or maybe a beer even. I remember hating beer as a kid, right? So acquired taste, it's not only for food, but somehow our brain keeps telling us that it's easier to accept something related to food, something that is so simple, something that is so plain. But it's not. It's what makes us human. Everything that we eat makes us the people who we are. Every people that we meet, every situation that we live through makes us the people that we are, right? That's why probably I have tried many times in my career as a professional chef to make people, some of my customers, eat things that they don't like without knowing it. And yes, I've lied to them straight to their face. I've not been the most honest. But once they finish eating it, I come to the table and tell them, listen, I just made you this. I remember one of the mothers of a really good friend of mine in Paris. She told me, you can give me anything you want, I just don't like beetroots. I just bought that morning like 6 different varieties of beetroots with different flavorings and everything. I said, like, you know what? I'm gonna make this lady eat an 8-course meal where the beetroot is gonna be the main ingredient. Even the dessert was made out of beetroot. I made an ice cream with beetroot and balsamic vinegar. And nowadays, this lady will never say again that she does not like beetroot because she enjoyed the whole menu. She didn't know she was eating beetroots. And because she didn't know she was eating beetroot, she was able to judge every single dish for what it was. It was not beetroot. It was something that she enjoyed. Or I like to believe that she enjoyed it, unless she lied to me. But the thing is that today, if you ask her, do you like beetroot? She said, like, I'm not sure. It depends. And that's a big change from a absolute definite no. The same thing if you come to a restaurant where I work and I tell you that I'm going to serve you a chicken infused chocolate tart with salted caramel. That's probably not the most appealing thing in the whole world, but I've done it. I did it in Mumbai at LEF 15 in this one sort of event that we had called Table Number 13, which was a tasting menu where people knew the theme of the meal, but they didn't actually know what they were eating. Well, I made like a carnivore meal, and the dessert had chicken on it. So I made a salted caramel with chicken broth, and I used the chicken skin and made it really crispy and crunchy and used it as the base of the tart. And everyone started eating it. And when they were at the middle of it, I was like, guys, this is made with chicken. Half of the people stopped eating it. They were enjoying themselves, but the other half, they just kept going. So that's just to give you like a context of how predisposed we are to not go beyond our boundaries. But if we want to succeed, if we want to stand out, if we want to grow as a human beings, I would just like to leave you with that one teaching or one learning or one sentence. Please stop living your lives and just go ahead and taste it. Guys, thank you so much.